Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Secret Wars in the American Wilderness. Kind of a /K/spooky thread, but also kind of serious. The American interior is massive. There are countless regions where the human population officially is 0 for hundreds of square miles, even thousands. While we've all heard and have enjoyed stories of cryptids and things such as wendigos and shit, my curiosity shifts more to the realistic, albeit still surreal possibilities that these regions could be host to everything ranging from organized crime-running things such as drug labs to outcast groups either politically or religiously motivated, or just deranged to live out in the middle of nowhere. This possibility leads my imagination into wondering, what if it's true? What if there could be straight-up organized crime groups waging guerrilla warfare against each other in the middle of nowhere, with even the US military being involved, either sending in special forces to kill them and wipe out any evidence to keep the public dark, or even funding them CIA style? There could be firefights being waged right now, and nobody would know other than those directly involved in said firefights. The possibility gets even stranger when you factor in weird mystery stories of experienced hikers with years to decades experience going missing, just for the search for these people being conducted in very weird ways, with even Army Special Forces getting involved, searching areas blocked off from local law enforcement to find them. What does /K/think of all of this? And what theories and/or stories do you guys have to share? Also, just a general spoopy thread, because why not?
Would be kind of pointless to have guerrilla warfare between criminals way out there when they can instead have it in the nearest big city. I wouldn't be that surprised if a lot of shit goes through the Everglades, though.
There were training camps belonging to the Contras and/or cults, both propped up by the CIA, in the Everglades during the 70s and 80s.
It would be pointless to fight in these areas since they pretty much hold no real value. Crime families and gangs fight each other to get valuable territory and trade routes, hence why they often focus so much on the cities, since that is where the high-value territory is for them. The only time you will have rogue groups in the woods are usually schizo cults.
The city groups would need their supply depots somewhere, with ever larger bases in ever more remote areas. Note that cartels do have tanks. Their enemies could then find out about them and hit them, which would necessitate defense structures and forces, retaliatory strikes, etc. Bam, wilderness warfare. Get any cults involved, get any inbred hicks, get special forces training parties, get a lot of imagination, and you'd probably get what OP describes.
What is a trap house? Guys doing organized criminal activity in some city like Detroit, Baltimore, or Chicago are not going to go all the way out into the boonies to store product when there's plenty of abandoned shacks they can use for that. In basically every major city they can store their product in. Long travel times like you'd get if you stashed Innawoods increases the risk of being hit on the move. Combating gangs that use abandoned properties is part of why in Detroit they've been trying to tear old abandoned buildings down for years, but there's always more and there's always places the cops just flat don't go. What you're going to see outside the cities is almost entirely smuggling and things related to it. They're going to be desperately trying to avoid detection by anyone, not just rivals when doing it. Starting a big-ass firefight on an important corridor used by basically everyone to move shit, causing the cops and feds to show up isn't just going to mess things up for your enemies, and can end up putting a few extra targets on your back.
Manufacturing illegal drugs on a mass scale necessitates a large operation that you wouldn't be able to hide in the city. You also have areas in the US where transporting from Mexico to those areas is just too far. Same reason why Ford manufactures in Mexico, while Toyota manufactures in the US. Because it's just too far to transport across an entire ocean. As a cartel, or as some locals who want to compete against a cartel in said areas. Your only move is to manufacture on a large scale within that region, which would require your operation to be located far away from any prying eyes.
They don't usually have one depot in case it gets hit. Instead, it's usually distributed into smaller depots. They may have one dedicated reception area where the drugs come in from out of town, state and country. That is, a warehouse near the port or a garage near a freeway. But then it's moved to another place. It could be a small mom and pop bakery. It could be a house. It could be anything they want. Usually it's just a house or apartment. They can move them too, of course.
There have been some shooting skirmishes between cartel growers and Haymong growers working for the Chinese in Northern California, but that's just one group raiding a rival group's grow and not really a war. Cartel growers raid each other all the time too. They've gotten in shootouts with agents as well.
We know drug cartels have farms and labs for sure. Claymores, mines, alarms, and vagabonds are deep in the woods, usually near deep wilderness streams and springs. Lone men out living in a cabin or dugout have been found over the years. When it comes to the cartels, you'd really want to be kitted up and masked, as there will be trail cams watching the area. Even if you wipe them out, they might come calling next week at your mom's. Lone men likely have zero to lose and zero for you to gain by fucking with them. If you rob a cartel of 4 kilos of meth, how you gonna sell it, not to the cartels and not go to prison? The 3 rusty AKs and 2 Baofangs worth combat? Go deep and build your own stuff.
To be fair, I think finding and offloading any drugs from a cartel wilderness camp are the hard parts. But actually knocking one over wouldn't be too hard with a group of 5 or 6 guys, night vision, and some training or planning. Not sure it'd be worth the investment either, but it is doable.
If I robbed a cartel, why would I want to sell it?
There is a national forest nearby that might as well be occupied by a mishmash of law enforcement because of the craziness. I've seen a Black Hawk heading in that direction and suspect it was some sort of raid. When I was in high school in criminal justice class, we had a Forest Service officer come in and talk to us about how there are cartel grow-ops staffed by what are basically slaves throughout the Appalachians. The guards here are told not to let any witnesses live, or else their families are killed. Also, never expect for there to be privacy out there. The woods are chock full of cameras unless you're really out there. Dude showed us a still of a guy's ass pressed up against his Jeep's window because he was having a redneck romp with some working girl by a road out there. It just seems so easy to get away with anything once you're off the beaten path by a ways. Who would be out there to check it out?
Cartels have moved grows to Appalachia? I thought that was strictly a Pacific Northwest thing.
It's barely Appalachia, but it's a pretty open secret in Ohio that there's pretty significant grow-ops deep in the woods of Hocking Hills to serve the appetite of Ohio State University and Ohio University.
Experienced hikers with years to decades experience going missing. I really think a lot of this comes down to a few things. The Park Service doesn't want to admit murders happen in the parks because the Park Service really tries to keep the perception up that parks are safe and healthy, which mathematically they are, but still. Not to mention, police don't really want to deal with park crime scenes or the jurisdictional issues that could occur in parks with overlapping states and federal state areas. What are you going to do? Get footprints from all 1,000 people who walk the park? Dust the trees for prints? Many experienced hikers may just be wandering the same few hikes or trails and wind up getting lost or separated anyway. It really doesn't take much to get lost. See above, but they may be hikers who just overestimated their abilities on a deep hike and got lost in the American interior and died of exposure, making odd choices along the way to shed weight or due to confusion, hypothermia, or limb sprangs that limit mobility, etc. Mountain lion attacks may just be more prevalent than usually recognized, which are about the only ambush predator in the US that could silently murder you and drag you off from a camp at short notice. Less likely. Honestly, I think a lot of people just overestimate their skills or get lost entirely.
The old adage of an experienced carpenter will cut off their finger before a novice does comes to mind. While living in Arizona, I lost count of the times I'd see an experienced hiker went missing in XYZ mountain range, and it later to be found out that said hiker decided they were hot shit and would pack less gear so they could challenge themselves. Not sure if I can find the news article, but one that comes to mind was a guy who went hiking on a trail in the Superstitions, and decided he'd be able to navigate it without looking at trail maps. Was found few weeks later with javelinas and yotes ripping his corpse apart. Seriously, those kit recommendations in hiking books are usually written in the blood of several men. Follow them or the Great Mother will rip you apart and laugh.
If you bother to read the accounts of those who almost ended up missing, it's clear that whatever it is not connected to human activity at all. Animals can detect spooks at a much greater range than humans. You can make yourself unpalatable to evil spooks by smelling of flowers and herbs. For example, carrying something that smells strongly of mint is an excellent idea. Spooks can, supposedly, be seen with Generation 3 night vision devices. Such infrared-only spooks are always evil. Spooks exist in different frequency bands, which our eyes interpret as color. The rule of thumb is higher frequency the better. A spook that is blue is far less likely to harm you than a spook that is only visible in infrared. The presence of a blue spook, or even better, an ultraviolet spook, is also likely to discourage red and redder spooks from being present.
I'd love to see the basis for some of this. Real or not, it's an interesting concept.
I've done a lot of reading and analogs of the paranormal critters and things American outdoorsman encounters are found described in sources dating back to before written history, beginning 5,000 years ago. The problem is that these sources are pagan sources, and America that is disregarded as superstition. I have also started to suspect that some of these critters are neither primitive nor dumb, as in that they actually post here on 4chan. Sometimes Anons are making cryptic posts that mean nothing unless you understand how their world works. That is, if my grandpa's grandpa did it this way, then it must have been how things were at the beginning of time.
I've wandered the deepest deep part of scary woods and seen the army training exercise signs. There's a whole lot of actual nothing going on out there, OP. It's boring. The singular time I've ever been way more aware and worried about something happening is deep mountain snowmobiling, simply because weather, avalanche, getting stuck, or rolling a sled onto yourself are all incredibly real dangers. And you're in the middle of nowhere, halfway up a mountain in a blizzard if you screw up. Fun stuff, though. But for real, I rarely see moose, let alone anything scarier. Definitely no secret wars, but everyone in the big empty parts of the country are armed with a smile, polite wave, and usually a whole posse because safety in numbers and all that.
There was a hot second when I lost my dad hiking back from Corona Arch outside of Moab at night without a light. I swear I heard him call me and saw movement in the corner of my eyes. But there was nothing. I was just freaking out a little bit and pushing my senses to find any clues, which made me think random noises in the stillness were actually my father calling me.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. Since this is basically in /x/thread, I've started irregularly doing patrols of my property in full autism battle rattle. Night optical devices, thermal monocular, the good ammo and plates. Started setting up trail cams too. Haven't ever caught anything beyond the usual wildlife on them, so that's a plus. Few too many unexplainable occurrences since I started living here. Haven't told a soul about this shit yet, and I've got more, but these are the ones that really stand out for me. The first, be me, just running around on my property doing some chores and cleaning some shit up. Turn my head. Brightest light I've ever seen in my life, like looking into the sun with a magnifying glass. Have worst headache I've ever had. Throw up repeatedly, disoriented, literally need to lay down and chug water. Felt both of my legs lock up in a full-on Charlie horse. It took me a while to limp home that day. The second, be me, fixing the posted signs on my property. Hear a psst anon in my wife's voice. I look around for a minute. Nothing. Go back to traipsing Innawoods to inspect and repair signs. Hear it again. Anon. Hey, anon. This time louder. Call out to her. No answer. Dead quiet and the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Absolutely not. I took my stuff and went home. My wife was in the living room doodling on her tablet. Tell her that there might be hobos on the property, so bring a gun if she decides to go out. The third, be me, LARPing. Think I'm sick as hell as I'm running drills on targets that I set up in front of some of the larger trees near the wood line. Getting pretty good times. Go to reload magazines and take my eyes off them for a minute. They were not in the same place that I had set them up. Some of them were a couple yards closer to where I've got the table set up, and some were actually in the woods, with a few partially behind trees. I waited a couple of days to take them down.
I'm gonna level with you, Anon. Outside of the first one, which sounds more like a stroke, you have been describing textbook symptoms for paranoid schizophrenia. You should go see a doctor and tell them about your experiences.
More likely, he was in some dimly lit quiet woods and thought, dude, what if I saw a skinwalker like in those spooky Greentexts? That would be so awesome right now. And basically tricked his own mind into interpreting forest sounds as a paranormal, because he wanted to.
As someone who may have had an actual combat encounter with a Wendigo skinwalker, some sort of paranormal happenings, I have experienced 2. As for experience 1, I have seen weird orbs of light at night in the middle of nowhere. This was during the combat encounter. And have had the moon mysteriously turn red a few times. Of the 2 times it turned red, like blood red, the first was with the skinwalker fight, and the second was in the middle of the desert at night. But I got the same vibes from the combat encounter.
If you read Native American lore, you will find that they had the custom of field names different from their regular names. It seems that these things were regular happenings to them. I've also read stories about American outdoorsmen encountering similar things. Furthermore, if we go by Native American lore, the Bigfoot and other kinds of spooks can leave behind images of people they abduct. They can also turn themselves into trees or boulders. Spooks are psychic and can read your surface thoughts. That's probably why that spook shifted your targets. Supposedly, gold can block psychic emissions from your brain. I suspect a gold-coated copper help might work too.
When I was homeless and on drugs, I was around some similar stuff. I was a junkie, but mostly stopped that by becoming a meth head. I lived in the woods for a while with a bunch of others. Not deep in the middle of nowhere or anything. We were off some deep hiking trails is all. I was just a homeless meth head who had gotten out of one bad situation and into another somewhat less shitty one. Most of us were like that to one degree or another, but there were others who were not. They weren't really part of any group, just hanging around the edges or whatever. They did weird stuff kind of like that and more. They liked messing with people, and it seemed really evil. We did drug addict antics, but they did stuff because they wanted to and could. Looking back, I don't actually think they were addicts, or even using really. I wish I could remember more or be more clear. I got them mixed up with when I started seeing Bigfoot, but I don't know if they're connected.
I want to hear more of this story. Tell me about seeing Bigfoot.
I lived in 2 different spots in the woods when I was using. Being out there was a little better than being on the streets because we didn't get hassled as much. You see some weird stuff when you're a meth head in the woods, but one night I woke up when I heard some rustling. I thought someone was stealing my stuff, so I jump up and see a huge hairy guy poking around the edge of my area. When I yell, he makes this weird groan noise and runs off. I spent the rest of the night sorting and resorting my stuff to make sure it's all there. After that, I'd see him, or I guess maybe another one, off in the distance watching or whatever. I never saw him from the trails or anything, just once I was back into the woods. But also those weird guys who would do screwed up shit would a lot of the time be moving around like that. They never directly messed with any of us, but I'd see them going deeper in the woods or hanging out by trees and stuff, like just sitting there. One time I was laying down and I look up and one of these guys was just sitting in a tree watching, but he had to be up there before I went there and started.
Be in a woods few years ago, camping alone for the lulls. Had my old 22 with me, not much stopping power, but just enough to deter animals and vagrants in the woods. Sleeping one night when I heard shit outside my tent. Hear low whispering. Immediately think it's a magic forest bum. Step outside, more annoyed than anything. Dark as fuck, but managed to make out a tall, lanky thing with long limbs and shit, scuttling on all fours. Frozen for a second, the thing and I stared at each other. Almost seems funny now that I think about it, but I shat my pants at the time. Tear my gaze from him, dive back into the tent and grab my rifle. By the time I came back out, the thing was scurrying away and screeching. Let off a few rounds just because scared as F stayed up all night, didn't move at all well until near high noon. I really want to say it was a meth head or some exotic species of druggie. But WTF would they be 6 miles deep in the woods, 3 miles away from any civilization?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.